第6单元，体育运动，课文口译。一、英汉口译。
Distinguished authorities, my fellow delegates, honored guests. Before I begin my formal remarks, I would like to thank the World Anti-Doping Agency, the Government of Spain, the Ministry of Education and Science, and the Spanish Sports Council for organizing this important conference. Minister, I thank you and your colleagues for your support, for your tough anti-doping legislation passed in the last year, and for your ongoing attention to the Operation Puerto case, which I am confident will be resolved soon. We respect the separation of power and the independence of the justice and do hope that Spanish justice will take a decision in the Puerto case as a matter of priority. I hope that the sports organizations will then soon be authorized to use the information contained in the Puerto report to take the necessary disciplinary sanctions against the guilty athletes. It is a great pleasure to be with you today to reflect on the importance of our anti-doping efforts, to review the successes we have achieved so far, to explore the challenges and the opportunities that lie ahead. Doping is one of the most serious threats the Olympic movement has ever seen. It undermines all we stand for. It endangers the health of athletes. It undermines the credibility of results. It risks drying out the recruitment of sport, as one day parents might refuse to send their children to sport clubs. The fight against doping involves, however, much more than elite sport alone. It is not only about testing and sanctioning well-known athletes. It is about the health and future of our population. It is therefore a public health problem. Recent studies indicate the same dynamics that exist in professional sports are emerging in high school and university sport programs around the world. These studies indicate that hundreds of thousands of teenagers and pre-teenagers are in danger. Doping also affects the general sporting public, namely the millions of so-called weekend athletes, runners and fitness club members who want to incorporate sport and exercise into their lives for the purpose of maintaining or improving their health, boosting their muscle mass, or bolstering their body image. A European Union report estimates that the incidence of doping among recreational athletes in the European Union has risen during the past 2 decades from approximately 5% to more than 20%. And let us not forget about the enormous amounts of anabolic steroids and ecstasy pills that are seized by the authorities in many countries. They are sold to much more people than athletes alone. As an advocate for sport and athletes around the world, the International Olympic Committee is unwavering in its commitment to combat doping in sport. This fight is our #1 priority. The IOC has been a leader in the fight against doping for more than 40 years. We established a medical commission in 1967. We developed the first list of prohibited drugs and worked out methods for their detection. We also established a system of sanctions. We accredited drug testing laboratories. All these measures were adopted by the Olympic movement. We established the Court of Arbitration for Sport, introduced out-of-competition testing, and funded early research into doping trends and detection methods. And we also funded the WADA budget for the first 2 years. After the Festina scandal in the Tour de France in 1998, we realized more was needed. In 1999, we organized a world conference on doping in Lausanne to harmonize anti-doping rules across the world of sport. And we called for support of governments. This led to the creation of WADA. Today, the IOC continues to be a leader in the fight against doping. In response to the seriousness of the threat, we have championed a policy of zero tolerance. We enforce this policy through a comprehensive program of testing during each edition of the Olympic Games. Next year in Beijing, we plan to conduct 4,500 in and out-of-competition tests. This is roughly 25% more than were carried out during the 2004 Games in Athens, and 90% more than the number of tests carried out in Sydney in 2000. We have also recently proposed a series of measures to strengthen our zero-tolerance policy. These measures include the denial of participation in the next Olympic Games for athletes and their entourage who have been sanctioned for more than 6 months. We will impose automatic suspensions after a positive A sample. We will impose stronger financial penalties for national Olympic committees and athletes and implement stricter interpretations related to therapeutic use exemptions. Our effort to eliminate doping among athletes during the 16 days of the Olympic Games is of course a necessary component of an effective international anti-doping agenda, but it is by no means sufficient. We rely on other stakeholders within the Olympic movement to help. The Olympic movement adopted the WADA code by the opening of the Athens Games in July 2004. A number of international federations and national Olympic committees still need to implement some aspects of the WADA code to be fully compliant. I urge the international federations and national Olympic committees to accelerate their efforts to achieve full compliance with WADA's guidelines by the 1st of January 2009. The impact of doping, of course, extends far beyond the boundaries of the Olympic movement. No one is unaffected. For this reason, we must work harder to establish a unified voice for fair play. Collaboration among the sports community and governments is necessary if we are to make a lasting difference. It is through our combined efforts that we will educate young people to make the right decisions. The value of the government support was made clear in 2006. That year, the Spanish Civil Guard launched the Operation Porto investigation. The same year, the IOC asked for the support of the Italian authorities to pursue those involved in a complex doping operation during the Turin Games. Recently, the Operation Raw Deal, conducted by the U.S. authorities and with the collaboration of many governments, unveiled a huge doping network. While government responsibility has received much press lately, the truth is that many governments have always been important players in the anti-doping movement. Many governments have passed anti-doping legislation. In 1989, the Council of Europe was a key player, along with the IOC, in preparing the International Charter Against Doping in Sport. This paved the way for the Copenhagen Declaration and the UNESCO International Convention Against Doping in Sport. As we meet now to open the next chapter in our unified fight against doping, I respectfully urge all governments to assume their full responsibility by ratifying the UNESCO Convention. I hope that the governments will accelerate the ratification process, just as we must finalize the compliance of some international federations and national Olympic committees by the 1st of January 2009. WADA will only have a full credibility when the government and the Olympic movement are compliant. Both partners of WADA, the government, and the sports movement have to do a lot and have to do it fast. The Third World Conference on Doping in Sport marks a milestone in our fight against doping. It will shape the next phase of our fight. As we move forward, let us build on our past success to promote cleaner sports. Let us tackle the challenges and opportunities we face with conviction and unified voice. Above all, let us never lose sight of why we are here: to give athletes at all levels the fair chance they deserve, to create an environment that allows champions to shine as role models for children, parents, and fans alike, to preserve the integrity and the very future of sport. Thank you.
2. 汉英口译。现代奥林匹克运动会历经100余年，历届奥运会标志和形象已成为独特的无形资产。特别是奥运会会徽，不仅是国际奥林匹克运动和奥运会形象品牌的重要载体，而且体现了 奥运会举办城市独特的文化魅力，体现了奥运会举办国家的民族性格和精神风貌，它是国际奥林匹克运动最具价值的资产之一。2008年奥运会在世界历史文化名城中国首都北京举办，创造出具有东方智慧、中国特色和北京特征的奥运会形象与景观，展示中国悠久的历史、灿烂的文化和北京2008年奥运会的巨大魅力，体现绿色奥运、科技奥运、人文奥运的理念，为奥林匹克运动留下独特遗产，这是国际奥委会和国际社会对我们的共同期待。为创造一个独特、精致、内涵丰富、形象生动的奥运会会徽，北京奥组委面向全球征集北京奥运会会徽设计作品，得到了海内外专业设计机构和专家的广泛参与。我们共收到参赛作品1985件，其中国外作品222件。所有作品都充分体现了中国文化的特色，并力求对奥林匹克理念和精神做了深入发掘。经过11位中外著名专家的精心评选，30位社会各界代表的认真评议，我们确定了会徽的方案。今年3月28日，国际奥委会对北京奥运会会徽给予了很高评价，正式同意这一方案。至此，北京奥运会会徽这一凝聚了国内外众多一流专家集体智慧的结晶正式诞生了。它体现了开放办奥运的精神，体现了北京奥组委力争一流的工作决心。我们高兴地看到，会徽蕴含着丰富的文化含义，表达了2008年奥运会的主题。2008年奥运会会徽将中国具有5000年历史的印章和书法等艺术形式与体育运动特征结合起来，巧妙地幻化成一个向前奔跑、迎接胜利的运动人形。这一设计凝聚了中华民族优秀的传统文化神韵。鲜红的色彩传达了中国文化特有的热情气氛，寓意丰富的图形形如一个京字，体现了举办地的名称，也像一个冲向终点的运动员，体现了对奥林匹克精神的追求，又似一个载歌载舞中的人，表达了13亿中国人民对奥林匹克运动的美好憧憬和欢迎八方宾客的热情与真诚。按照会徽所表达的人文奥运理念，我们将加快文化和体育事业的发展，促进社会的文明与进步，展现北京历史文化名城风貌和市民的良好精神风貌，实现东方神韵与现代奥运的完美结合。我们将加强对外交流与合作，推动中外文化的交流与融合，加深各国人民之间的了解、信任与友谊，使2008年奥运会成为促进世界和平、友谊与进步的广阔舞台。奥运会会徽是奥林匹克知识产权的重要组成部分，保护好会徽的知识产权是成功进行市场开发、举办一届最出色奥运会的重要保证。中国政府和北京市政府已经发布了实施保护奥林匹克知识产权的相关法规。认真执行这些法规是参与和支持奥运会筹办工作的实际行动。在举行会徽发布仪式之际，我们呼吁海内外所有关心和支持北京奥运会的人们，为维护奥林匹克知识产权、为保护会徽的价值、为建设良好的法治环境做出贡献。口译实践1. 英汉口译
Today, the Assembly has the honor of invoking the spirit of the Olympic truce. For several Olympiads, the United Nations has advocated the Olympic truce with a view to protecting, as far as possible, the interests of the athletes and sport in general, and to contributing to the quest for peaceful and diplomatic solutions to conflicts. It is a distinct privilege to welcome as witness to our work this morning members of the International Olympic Committee, led by IOC President Jacques Rogge, and including senior American members Ms. Anita DeFrance and Mr. James Easton. Further, it is with delight that the United States delegation notes the presence of the United States Olympic Committee, led by its Chief of International Relations, Mr. Robert Fasulo. The distinguished service of those leaders and countless other volunteers has indeed built a better and more peaceful world through sport and the Olympic deal. Let me just add that it is an honor for me, as a former governor of the state of New York, which is proud to have twice hosted the Winter Olympics, to rise in honor of this delegation. The practice of heralding an Olympic truce during the Games to enable the safe passage and participation of attendees through arenas of conflict is among the oldest of accords, dating from 776 BC. History reveals that the Olympic truce has transcended differences whenever people meet on the fields of fair play. As has been the case on 8 occasions in this hall since 1993, the United States is honored to be among the sponsors of today's draft resolution proclaiming the Olympic truce, entitled Building a Better and More Peaceful World Through Sport and Olympic Ideal. But it is not so much that the Assembly proclaims the truce as that its action today essentially validates the natural, truce-like atmosphere that prevails throughout the world community whenever countries meet on Olympic fields. In that sense, the Olympic truce was revived not by this Assembly in 1993. Rather, it was revived upon the convening of the modern Olympic Games themselves in 1896. As in ancient times, the Olympic truce's central purpose has been to enable the safe passage and participation of all concerned with the Games. Indeed, it has contributed to that end through the centuries during war and peace. Historical interpretations differ slightly. Did the ancient Games come before the truce among warring states? Or was the ancient truce necessary for the passage and participation of those who were otherwise enemies to meet at ancient Olympia? What is certain is that the Olympic truce, attributed to the oracle at Delphi, is at the pinnacle of the principles and purposes of Olympicism. Today, draft resolution exhorts the world to overcome similar threats, geopolitical threats, and to similarly tame them so as to ignite humankind to pursue the goals and ideas of international understanding, security, and prosperity as envisioned in the United Nations Charter. Today, member states adopt the Olympic truce at the United Nations. Next August, competitors will swear the athlete's oath of fair play at the opening ceremonies. Let those solemn practices inspire all others to make their own truces with conflicts in their lives that keep them from pursuing their own goals and ideas. Bringing the Olympic truce closer to home takes us from being spectators of excellence to being actual participants. Let today's draft resolution be implemented at all levels: intergovernmental, national, community, household, and personal. Intergovernmentally, the Olympic truce will continue to enliven various forms of United Nations collaborations in the field to promote peace through sport. Nationally, the Olympic truce might be further interpreted to suggest a timeout from societal unrest as each country supports its Olympic competitors. Communities and households can draw heavily on the example of Olympic accomplishment, and so, inspired, might commit to excellence in everyday pursuits. Individual witnesses to the Games can see fair play at work, and so moved might commit to fighting temptation that otherwise would keep them from realizing their goals and ideals. So today, our consideration here reminds the world to prepare for the forthcoming Games in spirit as well as in body. Sport is not an end in itself, but rather a means to educate the young of the world for the harmonious development of mankind. To promote the Olympic truce into concrete action, the IOC established the International Olympic Truce Foundation, which is based in Athens. Its programs led to global support and observance of the Olympic truce, and to the steady shaping of a culture of peace to promote dialogue. The foundation conducts the prestigious International Forum on Sport for Peace and the Olympic truce that meets biannually in Olympia. Promoting such initiatives in favor of the Olympic truce requires partnerships among the members of the Olympic family, international and national organizations, and non-governmental organizations that contribute to the cause of peace. Above all, the truce and its initiatives are those of the people of the world for the people of the world. The United States delegation recognizes and supports today's draft resolution for building a peaceful and better world through sport and Olympic ideal.
2. 汉英口译。女士们、先生们，我很高兴参加主题为“文明的和谐与共同繁荣：对人类文明方式的思考”的论坛，并对第3届北京论坛的成功表示祝贺。当今世界在经济、科技、社会等诸多方面获得了飞速发展，但同时又是个充满冲突、纷争和面临环境日益恶化的世界。我们是听任世界这样继续下去，还是共同努力开辟一个和平和可持续发展的时代？这是所有人，包括以奥林匹克运动为代表的世界体育界都应思考的问题。国际奥林匹克委员会作为奥林匹克运动的主导者，充分意识到自己的责任，努力使自己成为不同文明、不同国家、不同政治制度之间沟通的桥梁，人民之间友好相处的纽带。奥林匹克运动的宗旨是培养身心和谐发展的人，建设维护人类尊严的社会，为建立一个和平和更加美好的社会做出贡献。他所提倡的价值观是友谊、公平竞争、力争优胜、互相尊重，反对不论是种族、宗教、性别、政治制度等任何形式的歧视。概括起来说，就是英文的3个字 ：friendship, excellence, respect。国际奥林匹克委员会所领导的奥林匹克运动是当前世界上规模最大、影响最深远的文化体育现象。最近几届的奥运会，每届都有200多个国家和地区的近2万名运动员和体育管理人员，2000多名记者，700-800万来自本国和外国的观众，电视转播收视量高达400多亿人时。奥运会的影响远远超过政治、经济、文化、社会等各个领域。国际奥林匹克委员会通过奥运会的开幕式、闭幕式、火炬的传递，以及奥运会东道国长达数年的文化艺术活动来传播自己的理念，向世界传达和平和友谊的信息，并推动不同文明之间的交流。国际奥委会认为，体育必须与文化和教育相结合，才能使体育成为它实现目标的手段和载体。国际奥委会前主席认为，奥林匹克的精髓是体育与文化和教育的结合。现任主席同样指出，教育和文化是奥林匹克的根本。所以，除了奥林匹克运动会外，国际奥委会积极倡导和实施一系列文化和教育计划，并参与联合国专门机构、红十字会等组织所举办的人道主义行动。国际奥林匹克委员会建立于1894年，就其文化背景来说，主要是欧洲的文化。它初建时只有15个委员，主要来自欧洲。第1届奥林匹克运动会1896年在希腊举办时，只有13国参加。现在，国际奥委会所承认的国家和地区奥委会已多达203个，遍及世界各个角落。奥林匹克运动地理上的全球普及，必然要求它文化上的多样性，但这是一个相当漫长的过程。国际奥林匹克委员会对其领导的奥林匹克运动其本质多元化这一点是认同的，并且我觉得仍然在深化过程当中。这方面主要的挑战是奥林匹克运动必须改变长期以来所形成的欧洲中心主义的思路。1994年，在国际奥林匹克委员会成立100周年的奥林匹克大会上，与会者意识到世界是多样的，正是文化上的多样性使世界变得更加丰富多彩。人们应该理解和尊重这一多样性，而不是把某一种文化强加于人。 结果是提出了享有差别的权利。1997年，在国际奥林匹克运动文化委员会主持的论坛上，这个问题被进一步提出，会议上明确反对将某种单一文化模式凌驾于别的文化模式之上。论坛的最后声明强调，必须建立对不同文化加以包容和理解的共同意识。值得注意的是，那次论坛仅提到包容，没有进一步明确提出世界各国人民可以共同做出努力，共同实现美好的梦想，共同创造美好的未来。从以上可以看出，这个意识是逐步深化的。从100多年来奥林匹克运动的历史来看，它之所以成功，原因之一就是它对多种文化的兼容和尊重。这种明智的政策不仅确定了奥林匹克运动的多元性文化，也使它更具有凝聚力。可以毫不夸张地说，文化的多元性正是奥林匹克运动的财富和力量所在。北京奥运会的举办将大大有助于加强奥林匹克运动文化的多元性和交流性。国际奥委会100多年来，奥林匹克运动主要在欧洲、北美举行，在亚洲举行了仅仅2次，1964年在日本东京，1988年在韩国首尔。这2次在亚洲举办的奥运会，使以西方文化为主要背景的奥运会更多地了解了东方文化。2008年北京奥运会将是奥运会第一次在具有最悠久的东方文化传统的国家举行，对促进东西文化的交流具有重要的意义。以丝绸之路为主题，以亚洲为主，遍及5洲的火炬接力，肯定会大大加强各国之间的文化交流和相互吸纳。同时，北京奥运会不仅仅是东西文化的交流，北京提出来同一个世界、同一个梦想这一主题，向全世界发出了强烈的心声，就是中国愿意同全世界共同建设一个人与人之间的和睦、国与国之间的和平、人与自然之间的和谐相处的世界。没有人奢望奥林匹克可以解决世界面临的所有问题，但至少奥林匹克向人们展示了一个现象，并提供了一个启示。既然全世界的青年人可以在奥林匹克运动会的17天里，在友好、互相尊重的气氛中，各自尽量发挥自己的才能，进行公平的竞争，那么只要我们都怀有共同的良好愿望，并且做出更多的努力，就可以共同实现美好的梦想，共同创造美好的未来。奥林匹克应该也可以为人类的文明发展做出贡献。谢谢大家。